You think crossing $30,000 in savings will make everything easier. And in some ways, it does. But in other ways, everything gets harder. Not financially harder, mentally harder. Because 30,000 isn't just a number. It's a threshold. And once you cross it, the questions change. The pressure shifts. And suddenly, you're not just managing money anymore, you're managing expectations. Your own expectations. And that's where the real tension begins. Most people expect relief at this point. You've done the hard part. You've built the foundation. You've delayed things. You've stayed disciplined. You've finally reached a number that feels real, solid, significant, and you think, okay, now I can relax a little. Now the stress should ease. But it doesn't. Instead, something strange happens. You start thinking differently. Not better, just differently. And that difference brings a whole new kind of weight. Before 30,000, the goal was simple. Build something. Get to a number that feels like progress. Prove to yourself that you're not living paycheck to paycheck, that you're not fragile, that you have a cushion. And the cushion felt like the finish line. But once you're there, the finish line moves. Not because you're greedy, not because you're never satisfied, but because your brain recalibrates. It starts asking different questions. And those questions don't feel like progress. They feel like pressure. You start thinking about what this money could do, what it should do, whether it's working hard enough, whether you're using it right, whether it's growing fast enough. And suddenly, the money that was supposed to bring peace starts bringing doubt. Not doubt about whether you have enough, doubt about whether you're doing enough with it. And that's a completely different kind of stress. Here's what's actually happening. When you have very little saved, the emotional goal is clear. Survive, build safety, get stable. And every dollar you save moves you closer to that feeling. It's simple, it's directional, it's comforting. But once you pass a certain point, survival isn't the question anymore. The question becomes optimization. And optimization has no finish line. There's always a better account, a better allocation, a better strategy, a better return. And once you enter that mental space, calm becomes elusive because you're no longer protecting yourself from risk. You're comparing yourself to potential. This is the shift most people don't talk about. Before 30,000, you're building towards safety. After 30,000, you're managing possibility. And possibility is infinite. It's open-ended. It doesn't give you permission to stop thinking. It makes you think more. About timing, about opportunity, about whether you're being smart or passive. And that mental load doesn't show up in your budget. It shows up in how often you check your account, how often you second-guess your choices, how often you wonder if you're doing this right. And here's the part that feels unfair. You're doing everything correctly. You're saving. You're not spending recklessly. You're being responsible. But responsibility at this level doesn't feel lighter. It feels heavier. Because now you have something to protect, something to steward. Something that could grow or stagnate depending on what you do next. And that awareness, that constant low-level awareness, is exhausting in a way that no one prepared you for. People told you that saving money would bring freedom. And it does. But they didn't tell you that freedom also brings responsibility. And responsibility without guidance feels a lot like anxiety. You have options now. And options require decisions. And decisions require confidence. And if you don't feel confident, every choice starts to feel like a test. A test you're not sure you're passing. What makes this harder is that the advice changes at this level. When you had nothing saved, the advice was universal. Save something, anything, build an emergency fund, and that felt manageable. But once you cross 30,000, the advice splits. Some people say invest aggressively, others say stay safe, some say pay off debt, others say leverage it, some say maximize growth, others say protect what you have, and all of it sounds reasonable, and none of it feels certain. So you're left holding this money, knowing it should be doing something, but not knowing what. And that uncertainty doesn't feel like wealth. It feels like exposure. Here's what people misunderstand about this stage. They think the hard part is getting to 30,000, but the hard part is what comes after. Because after 30,000, you're not just managing money, you're managing identity. You're someone who has something now. And that something changes how you see yourself, how you see risk, how you see time. You start thinking in years, not months. You start thinking about compounding, not just accumulating. You start thinking about what this could become, not just what it is. And that shift in perspective is good, but it's also disorienting because you're not used to thinking this way, and no one taught you how. So you do what most people do. You research, you read, you compare, you calculate, and the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And that gap between what you have and what you understand creates a quiet kind of stress. Not panic, not fear, just this persistent hum of uncertainty. This feeling that you should be doing more, learning more, optimizing more. And that feeling doesn't go away just because you're being responsible. It intensifies because you're being responsible. Because now you care. And caring makes everything feel heavier. What actually improves at this stage is resilience. Not comfort, not ease. Resilience. You stop feeling like one bad month will destroy you. You stop checking your account with dread. You stop living in survival mode. And that's real. That's progress. But it's not the kind of progress that feels celebratory. It's the kind that feels stabilizing. And stabilizing isn't exciting. It's just solid. And solid doesn't always feel like enough when you're surrounded by noise about growth and opportunity and maximizing potential. Here's the realization that helps. Safety builds in layers, and each layer feels different. The first layer is having something. The second layer is protecting it. The third layer is growing it, and you're in the second layer now. You're past the desperation of having nothing, but you're not yet in the ease of having enough that it runs itself. You're in the middle, and the middle is always the hardest part because you're aware of what you have, and you're aware of what you don't. And that dual awareness is uncomfortable, but it's also normal, and knowing it's normal makes it a little easier to sit with. What still feels uncomfortable is the lack of certainty. You want someone to tell you exactly what to do, exactly where to put this money, exactly how to think about it, but no one can tell you that because it depends on your timeline, your risk tolerance, your goals, your life, and all of those things are personal. So the discomfort you're feeling isn't a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that you're doing it yourself. And doing it yourself always feels harder than following a script. But it's also the only way it actually works. What to expect next is this. The mental noise will quiet. Not because you'll have all the answers, but because you'll get more comfortable not having them. You'll stop expecting certainty. You'll stop comparing your choices to everyone else's. You'll stop treating every financial decision like it's permanent. And slowly, the money will stop feeling like a test. It'll start feeling like a tool you're learning to use. Not perfectly, but competently. And competence doesn't require perfection. It just requires consistency. And you already have that. If you're at this stage and it feels harder than you expected, you're not alone. And you're not broken. You're just in a transition. From building to managing. From scarcity to stewardship. From hoping to planning. And transitions are always awkward. Always uncertain. Always a little uncomfortable. But they're also where growth happens. Not the kind of growth that shows up in your account balance, the kind that shows up in how you think, how you decide, how you carry the weight of what you've built. This channel exists for moments like this, when the advice gets noisy and your head gets heavy, and you just need someone to say it's okay to not have it all figured out yet. Subscribe if that's helpful. And come back when you need a reminder that financial progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just quiet and steady and enough.